I'd like to call our next witness, which is Marc Wadsworth, who is a core participant in the missing Undercover Police Inquiry, and Marc was active in probably in the 1980s as well, but certainly in the 1990s campaign against racism and fascism, and he's going to give a statement to this inquiry.
When Stephen Lawrence was murdered in April 1993, I was the leader of the Anti-Racist Alliance, Europe's largest black-led anti-racist organisation. And through a third party, the parents of Stephen, Doreen and Neville asked my organisation to get involved with them in their campaign for justice. So I visited their Lanover Road home in Woolwich and met with Doreen and Neville, and they asked me to help them set up a campaign for justice which would be two-pronged. That was to win political support and get the media on side, which I, as a former TV journalist, I had some expertise in the area of, you might call it, media management. And I had a political background as the former leader of the Labour Party Black Sections, which was founded in 1983. In 1987, 4 of our members got into Parliament, as you'll be aware, in the historic breakthrough: Diane Abbott, Paul Boateng, Bernie Grant and Keith Vass. So I agreed to the job of helping Doreen and Neville set up their campaign for justice for Stephen Lawrence. Very difficult job, sorting that out, because there wasn't a huge amount of support on the ground. I went to the Voice newspaper and asked them to help us, a natural ally you would have thought, and their then editor said, we're going to play a wait-and-see game and see how the other media pick this up, and they weren't keen to go forward. It was very difficult. At some point now, I lived in Brixton at the time, a black police officer in plain clothes approached me in a supermarket and said, "You're Marc Wadsworth, aren't you? You lead the Anti-Racist Alliance. I would be very careful if I was you, because the special branch are running an operation out of Brixton Police Station and watching you 24/7. So I thought, well, from time to time, as a journalist who's on television, is visible, I do get people coming up to me with all sorts of fantastical things that they say, and I took it with a pinch of salt. Sometime later, at an anti-racist festival that I'd organised in Brockwell Park in the Brixton area, I saw the same person in full police uniform. So he was a police officer. Now, what's shocking about the way the police handled the investigation is that they had many opportunities to arrest the key suspects, with people putting notes on the windscreens of police cars, going into police stations and giving the same set of names, and yet they refused to arrest. And on one occasion, it was said that there should be a police photographer taking photographs as part of surveillance outside the main suspect's home, and that didn't happen for days because the one officer available to do that was apparently tracking a suspected black burglar. So a burglary and a suspect who is black is more important than tracking down these murderers. On another occasion, the suspects, quite soon after the murder, were seen leaving that same address with black bin liners full, we believe, of clothing that would have had blood on it, and they weren't arrested. So there were many examples of where surveillance was used in the very worst way against Doreen and Neville, treated themselves as suspects, yet their grieving parents, myself and others. Now, with the Pitchford now Mitting inquiry, Your Honour, we're faced with this NCND that you heard from the police officer a moment ago, neither confirm nor deny. This inquiry cannot proceed if the NCND smokescreen, or you could call it a brick wall, is allowed to continue. We need to know who was spied on, by whom, authorised by whom, in terms of senior police involved in Spycops, and during what period, and what information they hold on us. And there should be an advisory panel made up of women, black people, trade unionists, and activists who know exactly what it was like to be involved in these campaigns. And isn't it intriguing that police officers are now using human rights laws to claim
That's right.
the opportunity not to be identified, for their identities not to be made public. So all we're left with are cover names, which are pretty useless. And I still haven't seen the cover name of the person who was watching me spying on the family of Doreen Lawrence and other activists. So that needs to change. We shouldn't be waiting until 2028 for the 30-year rule to kick in for us to get the information we need. That's my evidence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wadsworth. First of all, I'll ask the audience if you've got any questions. Okay, we've got a member of our panel that's got a question.
Thank you for your evidence, and I don't think there's anyone who can listen to that and see that the police intrusion and surveillance on grieving families can ever be justified. But I just wanted to come back to a point. You were talking about the cover names and saying that wasn't enough. Can I just clarify that you're asking for a recommendation that the real names of these officers are also released or not?
Well, it's my understanding that several of these officers are no longer serving police officers, so I can't see how revealing their names now, when some of them are either retired or no longer police officers. Often, you know, police go and set up security firms or do consultancy and retire very early, maybe in their 50s. There should be no reason whatsoever where in those circumstances we're not able to get hold of real names. I cannot see where human rights legislation kicks in to stop us knowing the names in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from the audience? Man there.
Sebastian Toth, Conservative Party. Some names of these brave officers have been publicised by subversive elements, and look what's happened to them. One chap has even lost his job.
My understanding that Peter Francis has come forward of his own volition and identified himself. Now, I hope that there are other honourable police officers with scruples that, even if the inquiry isn't prepared to do this work, will do the same as Peter Francis.
Okay, thank you.
And Lois,
Yes.
there was an undercover drugs officer called Neil Woods who came to the public inquiry on one of the last sessions. He said whatever our particular view is on drug smuggling or use, he said he'd sent down more people than the whole of the SDS squad in 50 years. And he has his name known, he is known in his community, his family is known, no one has touched him. So there's no parallel whatsoever, and there's no acceptable reason why their name can't be released. And there is huge questions whether they should have had payoffs, and they should have the kind of pensions that none of us would be allowed to have if we were done for any gross misconduct.
Exactly.
And I should just give our audience some facts here, because a group of us met with Judge Mitting on Friday, and he said that he was going to release some of the names of the cover names of police, secret police from the Special Demonstration Squad, but almost none of the names at all from the NPOIU, is that right? Or the NPIOU, which is the organisation, once the SDS was disbanded, it was the second organisation for the Spycops. So, and in this inquiry, this People's Inquiry, and in my role as chair, the way I would like to run it is the other way around, and that is, in order to have a fully open democratic inquiry, then what I would do if I was really in charge is publish all of the undercover names so that people out there can say, well, actually, I knew that person, that police officer infiltrated our group, and they can come forward. Because at the moment, the only people who have come forward as non-state core participants are those people who have either uncovered the spy, the organisation or the undercover research group, or whatever, have uncovered their spy, or their spy has been uncovered for them and they've been able to come forward. So in order to know the full extent of political policing in this country, the missing inquiry needs to release the cover names, most definitely, but we want the real names as well, but as a starting point, the cover names, but also the list of organisations which have been spied on, because we've got a tiny little, we only know a handful of the organisations, it's only been confirmed a handful of the organisations that were actually infiltrated. So I'll leave that there, because we're going to come back to demands and recommendations at the end. But I just thought that you needed that information, and we know that there's around 1,000 organisations that have been spied on. Right. Our police representative, have you got a question for Mr. Wadsworth?
I do. And I think, on behalf of the police, we will all agree that mistakes were made over the years, and we've all learned from Macpherson and other inquiries. Sorry, I was trying to say that with a straight face. But I think it's well established that many groups try to associate themselves with family justice campaigns just to cause trouble. And many of the undercovers would say that they were there to protect the families.
There to protect the families. The families invited us to advise and help them in whatever way we could. And in fact, I devised a mechanism, because I didn't want anything to do with the police, given my experience as someone who'd lived in Brixton for 20 years, including being there during the uprising of 1981, of bringing in a solicitor, Imran Khan, to be the liaison person with the police. I had nothing to do with the police. I dealt with the political campaign and the media campaign, and Imran dealt with the legal side of things, which worked very well, because he knew what he was talking about. And often what happens with these families is that they are captured by the police, told not to speak to the media, not to have a political campaign, and it's very difficult for them to say no. Let me give you an example. Neville, on one occasion, appeared at a Scotland Yard press conference where he called for the reintroduction of hanging, which is a police agenda. So that just demonstrates how they get hold of vulnerable people and manipulate them for political purpose. So they were doing the manipulation, not us. Thank you very much for organising this event, and it's going to be really helpful for when I meet Judge Mitting on the 12th with other core participants.